Welcome to the Economist in Your Ear podcast. So here's a question for you. How does a small island, really little more than farmland and fishing villages, transform itself into the world's biggest producer of a vital industrial chemical and do it in barely a decade? It sounds almost impossible, right? But that's exactly what happened on Changsing Island. It's in the Bohai Sea, northeast China. Today, we're going to look closely at Changsing because it's a perfect case study for understanding China's industrial rise. We want to unpack that powerful mix of forces, policy, massive state support, and sheer private ambition that's led to China dominating certain key manufacturing areas.
Right. And the substance we're focusing on really helps clarify things. It's called purified terephthalic acid, PTA. Sounds niche, I know. But this white powder, it's the core ingredient for making polyester. So you wear it, packaging uses it, plastics, it's everywhere. And the story of Changsing, how it went from this coastal backwater to the world's PTA hub, it really shows you how China shifted from importing this stuff to being the dominant global supplier.
Yeah.
And incredibly fast.
Okay, let's get into that speed. Changsing Island wasn't an obvious choice, was it? It was picked in the early 2000s, mainly because it had this underused deepwater shoreline.
Exactly. That was the asset.
So state planners just pointed at it and said, okay, special development zone, focus, petrochemicals.
And that designation wasn't just a name tag. It was like a green light.
The golden ticket, you mean?
Pretty much, yeah. It promised and delivered streamlined approvals, easier access to land, subsidies, basically telling the bureaucracy, get out of the way, make this happen.
Right. Removing the friction you'd normally expect for huge projects.
Absolutely.
So who stepped up? You might think some giant state-owned company, but no. The key player here is Hengley, a private company, right? Started making textiles back in '94.
That's them. And textiles in China, well, it's a tough business. Razor-thin margins, brutal competition.
So Hengley realized they needed to climb up the ladder, get into something more profitable.
Exactly. They figured, why keep buying the main ingredient, PTA, when we could make it ourselves? Control the input, control the costs.
In Changsing, with that deepwater port access and all the policy advantages, it looked perfect.
Perfect platform. So they broke ground there in 2010, first PTA factory.
What's amazing is how the state machinery then latched on to Hengley's ambition.
It wasn't just local support. Changsing was quickly listed as a national priority project, part of this big plan to revitalize China's northeast.
And national priority means what exactly? Huge benefits.
Staggering benefits.
Yeah.
Especially for a private company like Hengley. We're talking deep tax breaks, landed preferential prices, regulations bent or fast-tracked, and critically, access to huge lines of credit from state banks. Basically almost unlimited cheap money. This wasn't just helping, it was a strategic partnership, engineered from the top down.
Okay, we need to grasp the scale of that state backing. What kind of money are we really talking about? Because, companies in the West just don't get this kind of help.
They really don't. If you look at bigger picture, economists estimate China's overall industrial policy across all sectors costs something like 4.4% of its GDP.
4.4%, that's enormous. It's colossal. Compared to their economy size, it dwarfs what any OECD country spends on industrial support. It creates this fundamental cost advantage.
An advantage foreign competitors just can't match.
Exactly. And that's how Hengley, a private firm, could pour around 25 billion yuan, that's like 3.5 billion US dollars, into this one island complex. Plus, the state did the heavy lifting on infrastructure for them, dredging the port, reclaiming tidal flats to literally make more land, building top-tier port facilities tailored to Hengley's needs. They built the foundation.
And the result is, well, it's dominance. Hengley's Changsing plant is the world's biggest PTA producer. China makes over 60% of the global total now.
Mm-hmm.
But achieving that scale wasn't the end game, was it? They kept going.
Right. Scale was just step one. Once they had that massive PTA capacity, 11.6 million tons a year just at Changsing, they looked backwards down the supply chain.
Okay, so vertical integration kicks in.
Big time. They needed to stop relying on imported raw materials for the PTA itself.
Because if PTA makes polyester, what makes PTA? The main feedstock is a chemical called paraxylene, PX.
PX, okay.
So securing your own PX supply is the next logical move if you want to control cost and, guarantee supply.
So they went from making the fabric to making the main ingredient for the fabric to making the ingredient for the ingredient.
Precisely.
But getting PX, that requires crude oil, right? How far back did they go?
This is where it gets really wild. To secure the crude oil needed to make the PX, Hengley actually set up its own unit to build supertankers.
Wait, hang on. They started building their own ships just to transport oil for their chemical plant. They went from textiles in '94 to running a shipping line and refinery.
It sounds incredible, doesn't it? But it shows just how deep that vertical integration goes. Control everything, from the oil well, essentially, to the final polyester fiber.
It creates this fortress, a moat, like you said.
Yeah, a moat of self-reliance. It cuts out supply chain risks and locks in those cost advantages that others just can't replicate.
And it's not just about physical stuff like ports and tankers, is it? There's an R&D angle, too.
Oh, absolutely. And this is where the state support gets even more sophisticated.
Yeah.
Literally a short drive away, less than 10 minutes from Hengali's giant complex, is the Dalian Institute of Chemical Physics.
Part of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, so top-tier government research.
Exactly. World class. And Hengali has this incredibly close relationship. They talk openly about benefiting from the, quote, rapid commercialization of research outcomes.
So the state funds the fundamental research, and Hengali basically gets first dibs to turn it into better, cheaper industrial processes, like an external R&D department funded by the taxpayer.
That's pretty much how it works. It means their technology, their efficiency, it's not static. It's constantly being improved, optimized by some of the country's best scientists.
They're not just building big, they're building smarter, faster.
Right. And they invest themselves, too. Their reported R&D spending in 2023 was, 1.37 billion yuan? Up
Wow.
nearly 16% year on year. They're relentlessly optimizing those PTA and PX plants, squeezing out every last bit of efficiency.
Okay, so putting it all together, you've got the massive state funding, the cheap credit, the perfect vertical integration from oil tanker to polyester, plus this state-backed R&D pipeline. It sounds totally unchallengeable, like a monopoly lockdown type.
Well, that's where we need a bit of nuance. Dominance is definitely the right word,
Yeah.
but unchallengeable monopoly maybe slightly overstates it. Technically, other companies could try to build a competing plant. The capital needed is huge, but doable. But the real barrier isn't just the money. It's replicating that whole ecosystem Changxing represents. The specific state-backed cost structure, those deep R&D links, the way integration is almost mandated, that unique cocktail of advantages. That's what's almost impossible for a private company operating in a purely market economy to match.
Which raises the question, how do other countries even respond to this? Doesn't this kind of state backing, creating such a skewed cost structure, potentially violate trade rules?
That's the million-dollar or maybe billion-dollar question. It's a massive policy headache for competitors in, say, Europe or North America. They're facing an opponent subsidized not just with cash, but with cheap land, cheap loans, integrated infrastructure, free R&D. It's structural. Standard trade defense tools like tariffs struggle to fully address that kind of embedded advantage.
But even with all that upstream power, does it guarantee success downstream? Hengali still depends on people buying polyester, right? And that market can be tough.
Very tough. And yes, there are signs of vulnerability. Their dominance in making the raw material doesn't automatically mean guaranteed profits.
You hear those stories, lorry drivers waiting outside the Changxing gates for days sometimes because demand for the final products is weak. That huge gleaming plant and then trucks just sitting idle.
Exactly. It's a visual reminder of that dependency. And the wider data backs it up. The whole Chinese chemical sector saw profits drop significantly in 2023. I think it was over 30% down year on year. Yeah. So even global leaders like Hengali aren't immune to market cycles, oversupply, or margin pressure in the end markets they sell into. Upstream dominance doesn't guarantee smooth sailing.
There's also the environmental side. These are massive chemical plants. We talked about reclaiming tidal flats. There are emissions, land use impacts.
For sure. Big chemical operations always carry environmental baggage. But interestingly, Changxing is trying to turn environmental pressure into another competitive edge.
How? Isn't environmental compliance usually just a cost?
It is a cost, but it's a cost they, backed by the state and their scale, can probably handle better than potential competitors. They're heavily promoting Changxing now as a green petrochemical industrial base. They're talking up low-carbon processes, circular economy initiatives. By setting high domestic environmental standards, they arguably make it harder and more expensive for foreign firms playing catch-up. It adds another layer of complexity while also giving their own operations a green sheen. It's quite strategic.
So, stepping back, why does this story about PTA on one Chinese island matter to the rest of us? To someone not in the chemical industry?
Because it's what people sometimes call an industry of industries. PTA itself might be a bulk commodity, but think about what it goes into.
Clothes, plastics, packaging.
Right. Textiles, automotive parts, bottles, fibers, composites for construction, even defense uses.
Mm.
It feeds into almost everything. So if one country dominates the source chemical, that gives them enormous potential leverage across countless global supply chains.
Okay, I see. So right now, buyers globally might benefit from cheap Chinese PTA. It lowers their manufacturing costs.
Yeah, it frees up capital for them to invest elsewhere. But it builds this huge dependency, a massive vulnerability.
What happens if China decides to use that control as a political tool? Or what if there's a major disruption, environmental, accidental, at a mega site like Changxing?
The knock-on effects could be catastrophic. Supply chains for everything from medical supplies to fast fashion could just seize up. The concentration of production creates a huge systemic risk.
And it's not like they're standing still. You mentioned the target keeps moving.
Exactly. Changxing isn't just going to keep churning out basic PTA forever. There's already a new government plan pushing the island to upgrade.
Into what?
More specialized chemicals, fine chemicals, new materials, moving up the value chain again towards higher margin, more sophisticated products.
So catching up means chasing a target that's constantly accelerating, both in scale and in technological sophistication.
Precisely. You have to match not just the size and the integration, but this continuous state-supported innovation engine as well.
Which leads to a really fundamental question, doesn't it?
I think so. When you look at the sheer scale of the state intervention at Changxing, the funding, the R&D links, the mandated integration is competing with that just an economic problem you can solve with trade policy, with tariffs or whatever? Or does it force other countries to fundamentally rethink the role their own states play in fostering key industries if they truly want to build competitive alternatives? It's a deep question about industrial strategy itself.
It's a very provocative thought to end on. Thanks for listening. Follow us for daily insights into world affairs, and don't forget to like, comment, and share.